Are any of you familiar with the saying, when the student is ready, the master will appear? Now, I want you to keep this saying in mind as we go through the teaching today. It's debatable, it's very obscure as to who actually originated this particular quote, but regardless, let's keep it in mind because it encapsulates a very interesting idea that we're going to explore today. So the title for today's teaching is Transition. Transition. And the illustration that I'm going to use is the biblical feast cycle. So the spiritual biblical Hebrew calendar began with Passover originally, and I have no intention of getting into any type of calendar debates. But originally, Exodus 12, 1 and 2 gives us the answer as to what it was. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And then it goes on to describe the Passover lamb and the sacrifice and so on and so forth. So that means that the very first thing of the spiritual biblical Hebrew calendar was Passover. And that's coming up here very, very soon. And so think about it. The very last thing we celebrated on the feast cycle was Purim. That happened just a few weeks ago, actually. And so the very last thing that we did was Purim. So Purim's obviously not a commanded feast the same way Passover was, but it is last on the cycle. And if you're unfamiliar with that, just very briefly look up the last few chapters of the book of Esther, and you will find everything you need to know about the Feast of Purim. That is the celebration of the deliverance from annihilation that Haman had planned for the Jewish people. And so look that up in the book of Esther. So you can say that the spiritual calendar, if it begins with Passover, it can end at Purim. So Purim is that final event before we are thrust into the new year. Why do you think that is? I want to explore some ideas that I have as to why that is so. So let's look a little bit closer at the spiritual biblical Hebrew calendar. What began the new year was the barley harvest and the new moon. Originally, this is found in Exodus 9:31. Again, just Exodus 12, 1 and 2, Exodus 13, 4, I believe, and others. But the barley harvest and the new moon worked in tandem to determine when the new year started. So when the barley harvest had reached the Aviv stage, and there's different spellings of that, then the very next new moon began the first day of the first month of the new year. So that word Aviv is a stage of growth of the barley harvest. It literally means green ears of grain. It refers to barley that is it's still soft, it's still new, but it's ripe. It's ripe for harvest. So let's think about that a little bit. It was the maturity level of the fruit of the harvest that signaled the change of the seasons. Okay, that preaches. Let me say that again. It was the maturity level of the fruit of the harvest that signaled the transition into a new year. So, the Lord always uses natural principles to illustrate spiritual ones. Always, always. He always uses types and shadows to explain to us deep spiritual truths. The spiritual is more real than this natural world. That is the way he describes things to us. So, if it was the natural maturity of the fruit that signaled the transition into the season, What do you think that means for the spiritual? So let's take the life of a believer and let's put it in a linear line, okay? Like a calendar of sorts, like a calendar line. Point A is when we become born again. We apply the blood of the Lamb over the doorpost of our life. That's Passover. The very first thing that happens. You can't come to the Father but through him. You have to go through the altar. You have to have the blood of the Lamb over your life. That's point A. Now let me explain one more topic that I'm going to be talking about. Spiritual maturity. Our degree of faith, love, etc. There's so many things that you can file under a very broad category. Spiritual maturity encompasses a lot of different things. But spiritual maturity is so important. So at Pesach, at Passover, at the beginning of our walk with the Lord, at that very beginning of the calendar, we are not mature. At Passover, for example, again, natural to explain spiritual. The Lord was proclaiming very loudly, very dramatically to his people and to the unbeliever all around them that the I am is the one that is bringing his people out of Egypt. Over and over and over again, from beginning to the end of that entire story, he is taking credit for what's happening. It is spiritual day. Remember this, spiritual day. You can clearly see the Almighty Creator of heaven and earth demonstrating incredible power. The darkness could be felt. You could smell the stench of the frogs. You could taste the bloody waters. The Almighty was visibly, tangibly, with overwhelming power, breaking in, intervening with that strong arm and delivering them out of Egypt. They just had to walk out. Jericho fell by them walking around it in obedience. So we know this story. We know the story that even with all of that miraculous manifestation of power, it was still all that they could do to just stay walking with him. And we ought not to be too critical, because every one of us has to go through that maturing process. That was the beginning. They were coming out of Egypt. They were still very much slaves at heart. And the story very much bears that out. And we all go through that exact same process. He had to take his little children by the hand and lead them. It says they were not ready for battle. He had to lead them carefully. Well, at the end of that calendar line, that linear line that we have out, if Passover is the beginning, then Purim is the end. So that would mean that Purim is something of maybe the climax, could be represented by Purim. So let's look at it. Purim, the feast that celebrates great deliverance from this crazy plan by a crazy man to destroy an entire people group. God's expectations of his people during this season was a little different. He did not move in the same way at all at Purim as he did at Passover. Quite the opposite, actually. It didn't appear to our natural senses that he was there at all. The Almighty was not speaking to his people directly or to the unbelievers around them. He didn't come down to Ahasuerus and say, "Let my people go. Don't kill them." He didn't wake up Haman in the middle of the night and say, "You're a dead man if you touch my people." He didn't do that. He didn't claim any sort of credit for anything. So not only was his name and voice absent from the book of Esther, from the events of Purim, his acts were absent as well. There were no miracles in the classic sense of the word. There was nothing overt. It was now spiritual night. Let's go back to spiritual maturity, which is that critically necessary process of growing from a child into a mature believer. I believe that, if you can categorize that, what that shows is that when the fruit of your life has grown and matured, whether it's in general overall or in a specific area, when you're willing to lay everything on the line, all of it, that benchmark is a Purim experience. Let me explain. God can shift you into the next season when you can say, even if the Lord's silent, if I perish, I perish. If you can say, though God slay me, yet will I trust him. If you can say, like the 3 Hebrew children, God's able to deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow. When the angel has to stay your hand to stop you from killing Isaac, the very thing that you know for a fact God told you was yours, that's a Purim experience. Now, God's a good shepherd. He doesn't expect this type of thing from a spiritual newborn. He doesn't expect it from those entering the Passover experience. He doesn't expect newborns to march in an army, but as you mature, he does expect soldiers in the army of the Lord. At Purim, God did not send out the death angel to slay like he did to slay the Egyptians. They had to pick up their own swords and fight the enemies that were trying to kill them themselves. Now, God was with them. Obviously, we know the end of the story. God was with them, but it was in a very, to our senses, a very, very different way than he had acted before. There comes a level of spiritual growth that we shouldn't require a sign. Require being the very key word. I mean, put bells and whistles around it, put stars, sparkles, whatever you want. Require a sign. We shouldn't require that the sight of a fiery, cloudy pillar. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would like that. That would make all of our emotions feel good. That would make my emotions to feel good. That would really make me feel a lot more bold. But we shouldn't require that to be assured of God's goodness and watchfulness over us, to be sure that he has a plan for us, to be sure that he's in charge of our lives and that he knows what's going on to us. Now, that's only something that faithfulness and that love is born out of trials. So that's exactly what's being spoken of in Psalm 32, 8 and 9, like the first part of it. It said, I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Don't be as the horse or as the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held with bit and bridle. So God doesn't want us perpetually in a spiritual playpen. He wants to be able to just guide us with his eye. Now, we may not be able to see the reason or the big picture of any of our circumstances yet, but there will be a time, if nothing else in the life to come, that we can look back and say, aha, he was there. He had a plan. And oh my goodness, I was a part of something that I had no idea about. So we need to have Purim experiences in our life. Again, as I said, be it overall or in specific areas that we have struggled with. So we need to get busy allowing God to ripen the fruit that we are supposed to bear. Now, I don't know about you. I don't like fighting the same battles over and over and over again. Now, I know our walk of faith is going to have trials. We are going to if you're a good soldier, you're going to attract the attention of the enemy. And the Lord is going to also allow things to grow you. So I'm not asking for a easy road. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about asking God to deliver us from all trials. But I at least like to have victory and at least be fighting for new ground. I at least want to be fighting for new ground once in a while. I want to be going from faith to faith, right? So it's a mysterious thing, and I don't believe any of us have a complete understanding about it. But I do believe that we can hasten the time. We can influence the seasons, and we do it by the degree to which we yield to God's maturing process, the degree to which we don't frustrate it, to the degree to which we don't fight against it or resent it. I'm preaching to myself. I don't know about you. You may be not getting anything out of this, but I'm getting it. So it's the maturity of the fruit that signals the transition of the new season, where new ground can begin to be fought for. New ground. Now, we need, the world needs believers to be students that are ready for the Master to appear. Students that are ready for the new thing that He is wanting to bring to pass in the earth. It's like just read it. It's like the last verses of this past week's Torah portion. That's in Exodus 40, I believe. Yes, Exodus 40. Let me read. Let's back up just a little bit. Let's go to verse 33. He, speaking of Moses, reared up the court around the tabernacle and the altar and set up the hanging of the court gate. So Moses finished the work. God had given him a task. He completed it. Then, you can say then with me, then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. The very thing that happened then, the very next thing that happened after Moses had completed the task that had been assigned to him, the glory of the Lord came in. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation because the cloud was on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Twice in 2 verses, the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. I want the glory of the Lord to fill this tabernacle. I know you want the glory of the Lord to fill your tabernacle. We need the glory of the Lord to fill the body of Messiah. Lord, help us to be students that are ready for the Master to come show us the new thing that He wants to do in this earth. Amen? Amen. Lord be with you. Until next time.